Hello, friends, and welcome to the ATC Double Cut. In this episode, I'm going to talk about something that seems very important to me, which is figuring out how much nitrogen to apply and figuring out how much sand to apply. And it's something that I feel like I've talked about this many times in the past. I feel like I've written about it many times in the past. And yet, I ended up having a conversation about this a few weeks ago, and I thought, let me go ahead and explain how I think about this now, because the fact that somebody was asking me this question led me to believe, or obviously I realized that I could do a better job of explaining it. Before we get started, I want to say welcome to all of the new followers on YouTube who are listening to this in Japanese. As many of you will know, the YouTube platform now does some auto dubbing. It will translate the transcript. It will find the transcript of what I'm saying in English, and it will translate it into 10 or 12 different languages. And one of those is Japanese. And I was just at the Japan Turf Show, and a bunch of people signed up for my YouTube channel. So I know some people will be watching this or listening to it for the first time. If you happen to want to listen to this in a different language, you can go to YouTube and see if you can listen to it in Hindi, or in Spanish, or in French, or in German, or in Japanese, or a few other languages. All right, the blog post we're going to talk about, and I will put a direct link to this in the show notes so that you can check it out. This blog post has a title, Sand and Nitrogen Amounts, How I Figure It Out. I was on a car ride out to a golf course with a friend who I've known for 20 years or so, and he does golf course management, and he's a former superintendent, now has a company that does maintenance outsourcing, and he was asking a question about a grass variety that he'd never grown before, and he'd talk to the supplier of that grass, and one person from the supplying company said that grass that he'd planted, it didn't need much sand top dressing. Just mow and mow and mow, don't top dress much. That's what he heard. And someone else from the company who supplied the grass, they told him that the grass would need more nitrogen than other grasses. So he was asking me what I think about that. Does this particular grass, does it just need mow and mow and mow, not so much top dressing? Does it need more nitrogen than other grasses? He said, what do I think about that? Well, I think the grass can tell us, the grass and soil can tell us. And I told him that I much prefer to base the amount of nitrogen and sand that we apply based on some site-specific measurements. And I don't think that the best way to manage is by just following general advice. I don't think the best way to do it is to do it on a regular programmed schedule either. I think the best way to do it is consider the grass and soil condition and then make adjustments. So that's all very general. Now let's get specific. So for nitrogen, I want to adjust it based on how much the grass is growing. We can tell how much the grass is growing by measuring the clipping volume. On golf course putting greens, they are almost always mown with baskets on the machines, with baskets that collect the clippings as they come out of the cutting unit. So we have a volume of clippings. We can measure that volume of clippings. I call that clipping volume, or clip vol for short. And this works out to be very simple. If the grass is producing more clippings than you want, reduce the nitrogen fertilizer rate. If the grass is not producing as many clippings as you want, increase the nitrogen rate. It's really that simple. And isn't that more likely to produce the result that we want instead of following advice, something like this grass needs about 3 times more N than you'd normally use? So that's a very general type of suggestion where I'm saying every grass is growing in its unique soil, its unique weather, its unique situation, its unique microenvironment. We can measure how much it's growing, and if we want it to grow more, add more nitrogen. If we want it to grow less, add less nitrogen. So in that way, the nitrogen rate is not fixed. The nitrogen rate turns out to be whatever it is at the end of the year after you add up all the nitrogen that's been applied. But what we've done is responded to the grass. For the sand top dressing, we can take a similar approach, and I recommended adjusting it based on OM246 total organic material test results. This is a simple test that is widely used all over the world. It measures the total organic material at a specific depth in the root zone. And how we use it is this. If the organic material is higher than we want, then we should add more sand. If the organic material is lower than we want, we should add less sand. And if the organic material is at the level that we want, then we should apply about the same amount of sand that we are currently applying. So to utilize this, we will also consider the surface performance. If the surfaces are softer than we want, then we usually want the organic material to go down, so we'll add more sand. If the surfaces are wetter than we want, then we usually want the organic material to go down, so we would add more sand. If the surfaces are harder than we want, or if the surfaces are drier than we want, then those would benefit from having more organic material near the surface. In that case, we would add less sand. And if the surfaces are just the way we want them, then we would add the same amount of sand. So to do this, we need to know how much sand we're applying, but that seems like a reasonable thing to do. Don't just throw sand out there. Know exactly how much you've applied so that you can then adjust it in the future. And that to me is a simple way to figure out how much sand to apply. So I close this blog post by saying, isn't this also a simple approach and more likely to produce the desired site-specific results rather than just mow and mow and mow and don't worry about adding too much sand? So we also had a discussion about what happens when you add a certain amount of sand, how that changes the soil organic matter. And I told him the very simple approximation is if we add 1 millimeter of sand, which is 3.3 cubic feet per 1,000 square feet. And I believe 1 millimeter works out to be 15. I think 1 millimeter is 15 tons per hectare, but don't quote me on that when I'm recording this early in the morning and from memory. You can go to the ATC's Shiny app, which has a conversion calculator to convert between top dressing units, like whether it's in millimeters or tons per hectare or cubic feet per 1,000 square feet or so on. I'll put a direct link to that in the show notes also. And actually this blog post has a link to that OM246 calculator in the footnote. So you'll be able to find that no problem. If you're interested in those exact rates, and we'll check if my memory is correct or if I have misstated it. Oh, all right. That's certainly a big enough disclaimer about the potential error there. I went for a run this morning, and I was thinking, if I have time when I get back to the room, I will record this quick podcast. And I knew I was going to do it about this particular blog post. And I thought maybe this is also related to one of my philosophies about maintenance work. And this is related to golf courses, but it's also related to any type of turfgrass management. And it's the question that I often ask, which is, what are we trying to accomplish by doing this task? And when it comes to nitrogen and to sand, I think we want to ask those questions. And when we're choosing the nitrogen rate, we're doing it to cause a change. When we're adjusting the nitrogen rate, we're adjusting it because we want to cause a change in the grass, which is either to grow more or grow less, or something related to that growth. And the same with sand. If we're adding more sand, or if we're not adding sand, or if we're reducing the sand rate, we're trying to accomplish something. And I always like to ask the question, what are we trying to accomplish? So if we frame all of our maintenance work decisions with that type of thought process, just spending a little bit of time thinking about what we're trying to accomplish and whether what we are doing is likely to accomplish that, whether that's likely to have the desired effect. I think somehow that has led me to this point right now where I make the recommendation to adjust the nitrogen rate based on clipping volume, and I find it really logical to recommend making changes in the sand top dressing rate based on the OM246 results, combined with an assessment of surface performance and whether the greens are on the too soft and too wet side, or whether the greens are on the too firm and too dry side. And that allows you to make those decisions about what are we trying to accomplish with this sand application. What are we trying to accomplish with this nitrogen application? It allows you to more likely make the right decision about some of those rate changes. I'm going to have one more segment here, which is a recommendation. Lee Strutt earlier this year made a suggestion. He said, your podcast might be more interesting if you did some segments about here's something cool or recommended or you don't want to miss, or a hidden gem about the location where you are, or something that you saw, some maybe just a little bit more personalized type of tidbits of information. So I'm going to recommend drip coffee. Let's see. I've got a drip bag coffee here. And this is really common in Japan, maybe in some other countries in Asia, but certainly common in Japan. I'm often on the road. I'm often staying in hotel rooms, and hotel rooms in Japan, they often don't have coffee. They always have a very high quality kettle. So this is quite a nice kettle here to keep the water, to heat water and then keep the water warm. So I've got the lovely kettle, but a lot of hotel rooms, they only have tea. They have like a bag of green tea that I can make. But I like to drink coffee. And so sometimes I carry around individual packs of instant coffee, but I find these drip bag coffee to be really good because these are very thin, and so they fit quite well in my luggage. I can pack 10 of them or so, and it doesn't take up hardly any space, and then I get freshly brewed coffee that I can enjoy. And this particular hotel where I'm staying at today, they provide this as an amenity to the guests. So I'm drinking the hotel coffee where they've actually provided it. But the hotels I stayed earlier this week, they didn't have coffee, and so I was using the drip bag coffee that I brought myself. I've got a series of photos and a video of how that works that I intend to put up on michaelwoods.com at some point, although I've had other priorities that may that take precedence over doing travel hack updates on michaelwoods.com. All right. I sure enjoyed sharing this with you. I think that this is something that it's good to be reminded of. It's good to think about. It's good to make these adjustments because we want the grass to get the right amount of nitrogen. Too much nitrogen and you get more thatch than you'd otherwise have. That's a problem. Too little nitrogen and you don't have the quality, the density of turf that you want. I listened to Frank Rossi and Dan Dinelli on Frank Rossi's Frankly Speaking podcast a couple weeks ago, and Dan was talking about not doing clipping volume, but spot treating greens with nitrogen based on a visual assessment of density, or maybe he's doing a count, but I assume he's just looking at the surfaces, finding the areas that don't have enough density, and he improves the quality of those areas by adding extra nitrogen. And I think that's what we want to do, is improve the quality always, and we can improve the quality by putting the right amount of nitrogen. We can make the quality worse. I guess what I'm trying to say is nitrogen is a powerful tool, but a dangerous one, because if you put the wrong amount, it causes so many problems. Too much and you get all kinds of problems. Too little and you also get problems. And so you constantly are trying to find the right amount. And I find clipping volume is a really useful way to find an appropriate amount of nitrogen to apply at a site at a particular time, considering what the grass condition is like now. That could be supplemented by a further check like Dan's doing of density, and then add some extra nitrogen where you don't have enough density. That sounds like a nice enhancement to that, but I still like to know how much the grass is growing overall, and that's where I find clipping volume so very useful, to find our base nitrogen rate that we would apply to all areas. All right, that's all kinds of information. I guess let me just show one more thing. I'm also traveling around with a GS3 ball, so I think measuring things are important. I'm talking about measuring the growth rate by clipping volume. Know how much nitrogen you apply. Measure the firmness. The GS3 is one tool that you can use to measure the firmness, and then measure the organic matter. Know how much sand you're applying. These are simple things once you get doing them. If you're doing none of this, then it can certainly seem overwhelming. But the place where I would start is by measuring the playing surface performance and then measure the clipping volume, the growth rate, and then add on things from there. So playing surface performance is what the results of the work are, and that's going to be your green speed, the bobble test if you're up for that, or use the GS3 and get the smoothness and trueness numbers off of that. Make some assessment of firmness. So you measure how the greens are performing, and then I think the next one to do is clipping volume. And a lot of things follow from that. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening and for watching. And I will be back again soon with more interesting turfgrass information. I will sign off now for ATC from Chiba, Japan. I'm Micah Woods. Bye-bye.